Hi, my name is Ruth Tebeau, and I am a teacher. And so I'm here just to talk a little bit today about what I've kind of seen and done to encourage pro-social behavior in my classrooms, and just kind of give you, I guess, a bigger perspective than what's in your textbook. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I've been teaching in elementary school here in the US in Michigan for 18 years. So I spent 2 years as a second grade classroom teacher. So those would be 7 and 8-year-olds. 2 years as a third grade classroom teacher, 9 years as a fourth grade classroom teacher. And then in there, I took a year and I was a teacher coach, a Title I director. That's a government funded program here. So that was more of like an administrative role. And after that year, I decided, yeah, not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be back in the classroom. So in the middle of that fourth grade time, I did that for a year, went back into the classroom. And then for the past 4 years, I've been a reading interventionist working with students in grades kindergarten through fourth grade, different grades, different years. This year I'm working with fourth graders. And that role has been a little bit different. I also, though, have been a mom for 4 years. So Lincoln was born 4 years ago. He's in preschool now. He goes 4 days a week. So that's an interesting perspective as a parent to see. And I'll talk a little bit about that and just to see that growth in his social behaviors as well as just that moral development. And then Harrison, he's 19 months. You can see here, here's Harrison. If you could see in that picture, if it was zoomed in more, he's not real happy. He was not happy that day. And then here's Lincoln. So that's kind of my background. I've taught at two different schools or two different types of schools here in Michigan. I've taught at a couple different charter schools that were in-person brick and mortar charter schools here in Flint, Michigan. I'm sure you've heard of Flint before with the water crisis and all of that. Inner city, high poverty rate, 95%, give or take a few percent, of the students would receive a free or reduced price lunch. So that would put them in that poverty level. As a charter school, that's different here than a traditional public school. The public school is what's offered to all the students. It's that local school they go to down the road, as opposed to my school, where it's a choice. It's still a public school. It's still funded by the government, but it's a different choice of a school. So it gives parents an option and creates even a little competition amongst schools, really. So I worked for two different charter schools here in Flint in brick and mortar. That was that first 14 years. And then for the past 4 years, since my son was born, I've worked at a virtual charter school here in Michigan. So I'm at my house working from home. My students are all are in their houses too. It's not homeschool. Some people get that confused. It's still very much a public school, again, funded by public dollars, but the students are being taught virtually. So we were kind of in the bandwagon before it became the cool thing, so to speak, with COVID. So our students are all over the state. As you can see there, it's like 96,000 square miles or 250,000 square kilometers. So a big area, so many different demographics. I have kids that are in inner city poverty, kind of like the kids were in Flint. I have some kids that are from Flint students, as well as kids that are way, way, way far north that live, where kind of remote. Even their internet is kind of spotty sometimes because of that. So definitely really different experiences with these kids all coming in. And in fact, since COVID happened, our school enrollment has more than doubled. And it's really changed the face of kind of our demographic even more. A lot of that demographic used to come from that inner city. And now it's just much more widespread all throughout the state. People are coming to our school who never would have chosen that and are finding it's a really good opportunity for their families that they wouldn't have tried if they kind of weren't forced to because they were schooling from home. So I've been around the block for a little bit and seen lots of different tools and techniques teachers have used. I also did some coaching here in my reading interventionist role. That role, by the way, I guess let me give a little bit of background that may not be familiar to you. As a reading interventionist, I'm working with the students who are the lowest readers, who are struggling and need some extra support. So it's a pull-out program. Outside of their initial classroom instructions they have with their teacher, I then pull them out and we work in small groups to help build up those reading skills. And I said pull out, again, we're virtual, so they come to me in a virtual class, and I teach that way. So it's a different it's a different dynamic, is the word I'm looking for, than as a classroom teacher. As a classroom teacher, I have those kids all day, right? They're mine. These ones, sometimes it's kind of like I'm borrowing them. They're still my students and they still really enjoy coming to my class, but it's definitely a little bit different than that classroom teacher role that I did for a long time. Both of them are good. Both of them, again, give me that opportunity. In fact, in some ways, in these small groups, I'm able to really work on those prosocial skills with kids in a smaller, more intimate setting, because I'm in a small group. I'm working with up to like 5 kids in a group, as opposed to a whole classroom of students. So as I was reflecting and thinking about what are some things that I have done or I've seen done over the years to kind of encourage that development of those prosocial skills. So those skills that are going to help them in that social environment. And so most schools are going to have some sort of social emotional program. This is kind of outside of the reading and the writing and the math and the social studies and the science or history. This is kind of a program that's teaching those character traits that we're looking for, right? Those prosocial skills that are going to help them succeed. So one program at my previous school we used was called Leader in Me. This is a link here to the Leader in Me website. And it's a great program based on Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think is the title of the book. And there are these 7 habits, like you can see here on the screen. And these 7 habits we go through and we teach the kids, these are these 7 things that will help you to be successful. And these first 3 are really focused on them as an individual. Being proactive, meaning I'm in charge of my weather, we tell the kids. They're in charge of their responses, they're in charge of those emotions. Begin with the end in mind, setting goals, right? Putting first things first, starting with what's most important. And then these last 4 really are their interactions with other people. So think win-win. How can we, in this situation, both come out in a place that we both want to be, right? How can we both be in that place of success? And not that I'm just giving up so you can have it, but so we both have a win. Seeking first to understand, then to be understood, listening before speaking. That one. Synergizing, that one's always kind of tricky. That's where we're working together. So how can we do this together to make it even better? And then sharpening the saw is doing those things that are going to encourage us to be like a well-rounded person. So we're not always focused on one thing, but encouraging hobbies and those types of things too. How can we do things to have fun? So that's kind of using that framework then. It's a really great way to promote those behaviors in the classroom, right? To teach those things. In my current school, we use 7 mindsets. It's a similar kind of thing. Again, another social emotional, teaching those prosocial skills. Again, the link is there and it's the same kind of idea. How can I take this mindset and change my mindset so it's focused on where I want to be? And that's really what that is. So those programs are really good because it gives kids a framework. You know, with my son, he's 3, and this is too much. We talk about some of these ideas. We talk about we have to put first things first, but he's not quite. He's 4. He's not quite at the place where he's going to understand all of these things. But we kind of have our own mantra that his job is to listen, obey, be kind. And then we've added a new one about keeping your hands to yourself because that's been a little bit of a problem in preschool. But that listening, obeying, and being kind, I feel like kind of encompasses at 4 a lot of those social skills that are gonna help him to move forward. You know, if I'm listening and obeying, I'm gonna be safe and I'm doing what I need to in the classroom. But that being kind, I feel like just encompasses everything, which is really hard for him. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's really hard for him to step back and be able to empathize and then move forward with other people because he's just not developmentally there yet. Another big thing as a classroom teacher, that I've tried to do is to really create a classroom family. And I use that family. I don't use it as much now because, again, I'm in a different role. But as a classroom teacher, we really wanted to create a family. You know, if we're a family, our job is to look out for one another and to take care of each other. And we can't do that if we're all butting heads. Now, do families fight? Yes. And that's part of that idea too, is that families fight, but at the same time, we're going to come together and we're going to protect each other and we're going to look for ways to encourage one another. One thing I really found in the classroom, again, I think part of it was environmental, where I am in just the culture. There was a lot of just reacting. So rather than being proactive and having the plan first, a lot of reacting. Someone bumps into you, so you're going to jump out at them and assume they're trying to come after you, you know, when really they're probably just walking and not paying attention to where they were going. So there was a lot of that reacting. And so really, I've had a lot of students where we had to back up a little bit and talk about how we can use words to communicate and stop and think before we just react. Because for a lot of the kids, that's not been a natural occurrence. And I'm not sure if that is, again, more cultural in where I was teaching, if that has to do with a change in kind of a shift in culture over time. You know, when I think about as a kid, there were kind of those couple kids who I can think of their names right now, that were the kids that were always in trouble, right? They were the ones who, I'm sure you could probably pick those out too. They were those ones who you knew kind of were always going to be in trouble. But now I feel like in my classroom, there was more of those. There was a larger proportion of that. And so I think a lot of that is kids just learning to communicate and have those, presuming those positive intentions. I feel like we say that a lot about adults, you know, assume people are coming in with a positive purpose. And kids don't always assume that, especially I feel like if it's the environment, and these pro-social skills are not necessarily encouraged as much as it is maybe survival is encouraged. Sometimes, you know, it's you got to do what you have to do when you're out in the streets, if you will, when you're out wherever, to take care of yourself. But that also doesn't translate into the classroom. So, excuse me, really teaching that explicitly is the key. Starting at the beginning of the year, I always spent a ton of time going over, what does it look like to be this family? What are the expectations that we have? And we would make charts of this. What are our expectations for one another? What are my expectations for you doing certain things, like for you lining up, or for you when we're working in the classroom, things like that. What are my expectations? What are your expectations? And then we would practice it. We would practice and model for each other what that looks like. Because again, kids don't always, I've found, and we're talking, these are mostly fourth graders. They're not coming in, so about 9, 10 years old. They're not coming in with this being the norm of I'm coming into a family, but it's more I'm coming in and on the defense. So really just teaching that. And you could see over time the progression as that would change. I had a student, his name was Devante, and he never presumed that positive intention from me in the beginning. It took a long time for him to get to that place where he was comfortable being a part of that classroom community. There was always someone out to get him, someone who was going to try and make him look bad, someone who was going to just get him, you know what I mean? Just trying to make him look bad, to get something from him. And so it took a lot of time and him building trust, or maybe me building trust with him, for him to realize, like, even though I have a high expectation and I'm here, I'm also going to help you meet that expectation. And part of that expectation was that interpersonal communication with other people, like how you're going to respond to people is going to make a difference in our classroom community. And so having that conversation of here's what this looks like when we're part of that classroom really made a difference for him, but it took a lot of time for him to get there. Another big thing that we want to do is we want to reward the good. So we want to point out when those students are helping they're being a part of the family. Lots of schools have different positive behavior programs that are geared around this. So that it might be, kids can earn like whatever kind of buck. It might be like the mascot of the school. If the school mascot was the lion, it could be lion bucks or things like that. Lots of schools will have their own currency, and then kids can use that to buy different things at a school store, things like that. But just taking the time to point it out in front of other people is huge for kids. Right now, again, I'm in a virtual school and we have these 7 mindsets. And so what we do is we have a monthly assembly, and teachers nominate the students who have shown that mindset of the month. And then during that assembly, and we have, when I say assembly, again, it's virtual, so it's on our platform and the kids are all there. There's a few hundred kids there. And the teachers get on and the kids see their names and they see what they're being recognized for. And again, it's just rewarding the good. They get a certificate, I think, maybe emailed to them. So they don't get a lot, but it's just that idea of pointing out, here's what you're doing that's really good. And I'm going to be honest, sometimes there's kids that's really hard for. It's hard to, you really have to stop and look for those things that they're doing. But when you reward those kids who are really struggling with these prosocial skills, it really makes a difference for them, because that little bit of effort they gave moves it so much further and they want to keep trying. So it's really important that we point out the good there. Another big thing is cooperative learning. So I have a link here as well to Kagan strategies. This is one example. These are specific strategies we use in the classroom for cooperative learning, meaning we're working together with other people, but we're not just throwing kids in a group and saying, okay, do this. We really have to set up the expectations for that group and practice, and model what that looks like so that they can be successful. And I've used those both in my virtual classroom and in my brick and mortar classroom, and it works. There is a picture of my brick and mortar classroom. Again, I just really tried to make that a homey environment that was like a family, to encourage those skills that we need to be successful. Because if we feel like we're in an environment that's comfortable and someone's put the effort into it, I feel like it makes that difference for those skills that we're looking for. Having celebrations together, again, like a family, having those times of celebrating the good, celebrating the holidays, celebrating those times creates that common bond among the classroom as well. And then along the same line, having laughter and fun. And the biggest thing, I say this is true in the classroom and it's true at home, and it's not easy, is to model that the adults in children's lives are their models for what these skills look like. They're the model for how that moral development goes through, right? They're the model for them as they're moving along this place of empathizing with other people. So we as the adults are that model, good or bad. And frankly, we all have bad days too, right? We're that model. So it's really important that we recognize that as teachers, as adults, as parents, that the kids are watching and that we're that model for what they're seeing. This is, so in my brick and mortar, or my virtual classroom, this is my virtual classroom. This is one of the slides I put up at the beginning, and I have the kids' names on there normally too. And again, this is me just trying to encourage some of those ideas that they need to know, that sometimes they don't hear, hey, you can do this, that we can do hard things and it's going to be okay. Kindness is important, right? So they see this every day. And then also the big thing, we talk about, my school has an acronym here. We are the Eagles. High Point Herald is our eagle. Our school name is High Point. And so we have the acronym SOAR. That's the expectations for behavior in our virtual classroom, so that they have self-control, they're on task, they have a good attitude, and they're respectful. And so we talk about this every day. Remember, here's what we need to do. Kids all the time, especially not in my class so much because it's so small, but when they're in their whole group classes, kids will get off topic in the chat and start, like the other day I saw one kid who was like trying to get somebody else's phone number in the chat, which they're not supposed to do. And they know that. And so the kids are all telling him to soar, and they just put the capital letters in their SOAR. So again, this is just one of those things that we do to help kids remember, here's how we operate in this environment, because this is what's best for everyone. And it really works. The biggest thing I find, I have fourth graders right now. Most of these are okay. I have a couple that have some chat box issues. Is really just making sure they have that video on. So showing they're engaged in my environment, that's a really huge prosocial behavior, is that you need to be engaged in this class. So I need to see your face. I need to know you're there. I need to know that you didn't just log into class and walk away. So I feel like with so much virtual schooling happening now, that's kind of even really changed the face of what some of these prosocial skills are, that I need to show that I'm there and I'm participating, because when I have a group of 5 people, those other 4 people are kind of counting on me to be a part of that process. And for some kids, that's a really abstract thing right now, is that they don't realize, because they're on the other side of a computer and it's abstract for them, they don't realize that what they do really does matter to that class. The younger kids especially, that's really hard for. My older kids get it, sometimes they just don't care, but they get it better, but they definitely just need that encouragement as well to be a participant. In my own kids, it's been really interesting to watch that development of their prosocial skills and that moral development, because I get to see not just this like 1 year snapshot of kids that I might have if I'm a classroom teacher, or now I've had some kids for multiple years, but I really get to see from the beginning until wherever we're at now. So, you know, from birth until now. So I've been able, for example, Lincoln, he's here, he's 4. I've been able to see that growth from the time he was born. And I can see when he was a toddler and very focused on I, right? And very focused on me and what I want, which is where Harrison is right now. You know, his favorite thing to say now is me too, me too, me too, and mine, 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 right? He's focused on that I, that self. Lincoln is beginning, especially with being in preschool, to become aware there's other kids. I mean, he always knew that, but remember, we've kind of been isolated too because of COVID. He, you know, for a while there, we were really focused here at home, and that's a large portion of his life because he's so young. But he's really beginning to see that like interacting with other kids is a good thing and matters. He's just not quite sure how to do that yet, because he's just not there yet. And it's really been interesting watching the interaction between the two. So if you look at this picture, like they look like they're all loving and, oh, come on, Harrison, I'm going to hold your hand and we're going to walk, which is true. They do love each other. But he also spends a lot of time pushing Harrison and then laughing, or you know, just roughhousing with him too much, and then again laughing at him. And he'll ask him if he's okay, because I've taught that skill, and we've talked about, you know, when someone's hurt and someone's crying, we need to help them, and we need to stop and see if they're okay. So he'll ask if he's okay, but really that's been a learned thing for him. It didn't come naturally. It's starting to now, and I think that's the difference. I think that, you know, there's the stages of moral development and the stages of empathy that kids learn, which is totally true. But at the same time, I feel like it's that nature versus nurture debate. Like the stages are there, but we need to teach kids through the process. The same is true as I'm teaching kids to read. Like there's a natural progression, but they need someone to support them along the way with all of these things. And so Lincoln's moving along in that process. And sometimes as the mom, it's really easy to not realize that and to see like where we are today and forget where we've come from. But he really has moved along that process. And I think one of the big things we did to start that process is for him to be self-aware, right? So we've got Harrison, who's the me too. And then we have to be aware of what our own feelings are. And that's kind of where we started, is naming a lot of feelings. And we're still working on a lot of those feelings, because right now Lincoln says he's mad about everything. When a lot of times I think he's frustrated and disappointed and sad. But naming those feelings, then he can start to recognize those feelings in other kids. But first he has to be able to recognize it in himself. And again, I feel like a lot of kids haven't had practice with that and need that practice of identifying how they feel to be able to move forward. And I saw that as the same true even with my older students. Even now, I've had some kids recently, even some fourth graders shut down in class, and over things that were surprising to me but clearly mattered to them. And as a fourth grader, it kind of stalled them. And I think if they had been able to name that emotion, they would be able to say, okay, that's how I'm feeling, but I can still move on as a fourth grader. And so that's kind of where we talked about with that, with those guys. So being able to name those feelings, I think, is huge. And then helping kids along those stages. So a couple things we have here at home. This was from school for Lincoln. He came home one day. He also has a language delay, which he's come so far in the past just over a year. He started out at 3 with like 10 words, and I mean, never stops talking now. But he came home and he was talking about this thing, and I didn't know what he was talking about. And so I sent his teacher a message, and she was talking about it was Tucker the turtle is what he was talking about. And they had read a book and I think watched a video, and it's all about what to do when you're mad, right? So I printed this out and put it on the wall, recognizing those feelings. And then he's supposed to go into his shell and calm down is the idea, right? So again, we use this to be able to help calm that situation in the moment. So then he can have those positive come out and have a positive plan and those pro-social behaviors moving forward. We're not there yet, but we're practicing. And then this is also from school, to be safe, be respectful, and be responsible. That's what they're supposed to be as busy bees. And if they are, they'll get their super B. And then this is what we do at home again. There's no reward for the stickers. It's just the idea of recognizing that he's listening, obeying, and being kind. The big thing is being kind to his brother a lot of times, but he'll even recognize, hey, I should get a sticker for that because that was kind. And I feel like that's a really big step, is that he realized, you know what, I did it right, I should mark it. And so that's really, even as I talk about it, it's really encouraging to me to remember, hey, he's got this. We're moving forward in the right direction, even though in the trenches of day-to-day, maybe not always do we remember. And then just reflecting too on like looking back generations, have those behaviors changed, have those expectations for those pro-social behavior changed? And I kind of think yes and no. If I look over the course of the past 18 years, I also worked with kids all through college, so really give another like 5 years to that. I would say in that amount of time, yes and no. I think now we're much more focused on explicitly teaching these behaviors in a school setting, like with those different programs like Leader and Me and 7 Mindsets. I think we do a lot more teaching them in this school setting, so it gets more attention. I think sometimes it's less focused on in homes. I feel like if we think about kids in previous generations, they were much more respectful and things like that, right? So I wonder though, if it just gets more attention because we're focusing on it in school, or if there really is, it really has changed. I think being kind has always been an important thing. And I think that kids know that. I think a lot of times because of environment, they're not sure what it should look like because they get all these other ideas and all these, and with so much social media and things now, the kids just get so much thrown at them. How do they navigate all that? And then again, I think that's where adults come in, and adults have to be that guide to take them through those emotions, through those what those behaviors should look like. I have found too that kids who play a lot of video games, kids who kind of are in that video game world, don't always empathize very much with their peers because they're so focused on that world. That imaginary world, like they're writing, and try to get them to talk about or write about something from their life, and it would be a video game, and they would just retell every step of the video game. And so I feel like sometimes kids, and it's different from kids who read a lot. Kids who read a lot, I feel like it really expands that imagination. Kids who are in the gaming world are really stuck in there. And there's not a lot of place for those pro-social behaviors because a lot of these games are all about me and all about I and not about us. So I'm not saying video games are necessarily bad, but I have seen those kids need, again, they need that bridge of an adult helping them to see, how does this game not reflect reality? And what do I need to do in reality to encourage and to help other people? So that's just a little bit on kind of what I've seen. That's just kind of my anecdotes on those behaviors from an elementary teacher. Feel free, my email is here. If you have questions, if you have comments, feel free to send those my way. I've also sent this presentation, so if you need a copy of it, if you don't have it, I can always share that with you as well. So thank you so much. I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if you have any other questions.